Hello, and welcome back to the fourth episode of the Carolyn Glick Mideast News Hour. I'm joined today again by my co-host, Gadi Taub. Hi, Gadi.
Hi, Carolyn. How are you?
Great. It's great to have you back. Gadi left us for vacation last week. I know, but it's okay. He's back, and we enjoyed last week with Dan Darker. So since we last met, there have been two major news stories in Israel. The first one happened last Thursday night at the Jewish festival of Lag BaOmer. Lag in Hebrew letters means 33, and it's the 33rd day of the Omer, which is the 7 weeks that separate the festival of Passover, where we mark the exodus from Egypt, with the festival of Shavuot, where we mark the acceptance of the Torah, the God's giving of the Torah to the children of Israel at Mount Sinai. And the 33rd day of the Omer, that whole period of 7 weeks, is sort of a mournful period of getting ready to receive the Torah. The 33rd day of the Omer is a day that commemorates the Jewish rebellion against the Roman Empire, where the Jews were rebelling first and foremost against the Roman edict to prohibit Torah study. And one of the things that religious Jews do on that day is they go up and they pray and they celebrate at the grave of the great sage of that era, Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai, and they go up by the tens and hundreds of thousands. This year, after the corona last year, there was no event there because of corona. But this year there was, and there were about 100,000 people there. And in one area by the mausoleum to the rabbi, there was a very narrow exit. And there were around 10,000 people there at the time at around 1 o'clock in the morning. And because of the slippery, it was slippery, the sort of the exit, the narrow sleeve that everybody was supposed to go down. You had a situation where people were falling, and the push from behind caused a human stampede. And as a result, tragically, 45 people ranging in ages from 13 to 65 were killed on the mountaintop, died on the mountaintop that evening. And so the festival of Lag BaOmer turned into a national tragedy. So that was the first terrible event of the week, and now there are calls reasonably for commissions of inquiry to look into what happened. And already what we're seeing is that part of the problem was an amorphous management arrangement at that holy site, which is the second most visited holy site in Israel after the Western Wall of the Temple. And it had a consortium of different groups with no specific group being particularly in charge. That was as a result of, in part at least, of a very impractical and not at all well thought out ruling by the Supreme Court on the issue in 2016, which just shows, I won't get into too many details about that, just that justices shouldn't be governing, and they shouldn't be second guessing the government on how best to manage things, because sometimes, in fact, in the case of Israel's Imperial Supreme Court, quite often, the justices simply don't know what they're talking about. And the heavy hand of Israel's Supreme Court and its legal fraternity has also been felt, and is felt on a daily basis, in the second area where we've had our major story of the week, which is Israel's ongoing political crisis, where in the wake of another inconclusive election that we had on the 21st of March, there doesn't seem to be a very clear governing majority either to Prime Minister Netanyahu or to the left, and the left-wing coalition now led by opposition leader Yair Lapid. And these sides have been sort of locked in confrontation now for over 2 years, since the first election in April 2019, with no conclusion. And 4 weeks ago, Prime Minister Netanyahu received a mandate from the head of state, the president of Israel, to form a coalition. He had 59 seats that were willing to work with him, and he needed 61 to get a governing majority in Israel's 120-seat Knesset. And he could not budge the two right-wing parties who hate him, who are led by people who hate him. They're small parties. One has 6 seats, one has 7. And as a result, he wasn't able to build a stable right-wing governing coalition. And as of Tuesday afternoon, which is when we're taping this show, it appeared that Netanyahu was going to have to return his mandate to the president, and we were going to get 3 very small right-wing parties working with the left wing to have a left-wing dominated coalition government that would be led sort of a puppet premier from one of the right-wing parties.
It's probably I think safe to say that this is going to be, if indeed this coalition forms, the first post-Zionist coalition that Israel would have. It would be supported by 2 Arab parties. Everybody is saying about the right, what do you have against Arab citizens of Israel? Which of course is not the point. The point is that these parties reject the right of Jews to self-determination. So they're anti-Zionist. They're against the idea of a Jewish nation state. So they will be the cornerstone of this coalition. Then there are the left wing parties, which are no longer. I come from the Zionist left, which are no longer even clearly Zionist. They're not renouncing Zionism outright, but they're increasingly progressive in the American sense. So they increasingly look like the radical wing of the Democratic Party in America. And then on top of this, on this monster, you would have Avigdor Lieberman, the Russian immigrant Israel Beitenu party, which is supposedly right wing. I don't know what to make of them. They're for now they're anti-Haredim, verging on anti-Semitism in their vicious propaganda. And then there is Gidon Saar, who seceded, should I say, Caroline?
Well, he abandoned he abandoned Likud. He was a senior Likud minister, and he abandoned the party to form his new party, Tikva Chadasha, the New Hope, which was a Lincoln Project initiative. He was early on. He was advised by the Lincoln Project, which is, of course, the former Republicans who have been pushing for the Democrats from the moment that Trump was inaugurated president in 2017. And they came over to Israel to help Gidon Saar be the never Trump, never Netanyahu party, to use right-wing votes to steal them away from the right and give them to the left.
And so Gidon Saar it's some have dubbed it a hate party because it clearly his agenda is just anti-Netanyahu. And then you said that Netanyahu had 59 in the coalition of the right, but there's the Yamina party headed by Naftali Bennett and Ayelet Shaked, who supposedly come from the settler movement or supposedly represented the Itnachalut, the settlement, and I don't think they've been aiming for a right-wing coalition from the start. If Netanyahu had 61, they would have a problem to switch to the other side, but they exacerbated this crisis. And I interviewed on my podcast Bezalel Smotrich, who is the head of the Tzionut Datit, the religious Zionist party, and he said he left Naftali Bennett and Ayelet Shaked. He said, and I made this the title of the podcast. He said Naftali Bennett is not aiming at a right-wing bloc. So they were a Trojan horse from the beginning. And if you think about Naftali Bennett's personal ambition, it's clear why. Because in the right-wing bloc, it's very difficult for him to become a prime minister.
I think that here's a place where we should probably explain to our viewers and our listeners, the history here. I personally know Naftali and Ayelet very, very well. I've known them for well over a decade. And Naftali for several years before he went into politics was a close friend of mine. And there's always been some question about him. He took over the National Religious Party, which was the ideological party of the religious Zionists in Israel, in 2012, and he renamed it the Jewish Home Party. And he wanted to turn it into a second Likud. He had this ambition. He's never hidden his ambition to become prime minister. You can't really become prime minister, at least until today, from a party that isn't a ruling faction. That's just a sectoral party that represents just one sector of Israeli society, in this case, the religious Zionists. In 2019 or 2018, he asked me to join him and run for Knesset with the Jewish Home Party. He said that he would give me sort of the top reserve spot for somebody that comes in from the outside, and I agreed. And then out from nowhere, and I did because, I'm sort of to the right of Likud. I mean, my views are ideologically right. I wrote a book. It's behind us. It's called The Israeli Solution. And it makes the case for Israeli application of Israeli law over all of Judea and Samaria. So it's larger than the Trump plan in terms of what it recommends doing for Israel, and it certainly opposes a two-state plan for the establishment of a Palestinian terrorist state in Israel's heartland. But I come from the ideological right, and he was a good friend of mine, and I was friendly with Ayelet. And there have always been doubts about them because when they first got elected to the Knesset in 2013, they made this sort of pact with Yair Lapid and his left-wing party that neither of them would join the government without the other one. And effectively what they did was by joining together, they formed the most unstable coalition that Netanyahu had, and he ended up overturning his own government just 15 months after it began operating because Naftali and Yair Lapid and Tzipi Livni, who was then the justice minister from her minor party, were actively working to subvert the government, to undermine Netanyahu in various ways, which we don't have to get into. So there were always doubts about what he was doing, but here he was leading this ideologically right-wing party and saying all of the right things publicly, and he had all the right friends ostensibly, and yet there were these lingering doubts about him, and they were, to a degree, they were borne out when he served as education minister in the Netanyahu government that was formed in 2015, because the permanent appointments that he made at the education ministry and the sort of the permanent government in Israel, that they have to get tenure in their positions, including the position of the person who's in charge of all social studies classes in Israel. So that's a very political job. He gave it to a post-Zionist, and there was a big hullabaloo before it was approved, and all of his constituents that were engaged in this issue were saying that he mustn't approve it, and he turned his back on them. But he's a very good salesman. That's what he did before he entered politics. He was selling his high-tech companies and making exits right, left, and center, and that was how he became a very wealthy man, and he joined politics, and Ayelet Shaked did the same thing. She was justice minister, and she kept talking about the need for judicial reform and legal reform. And she did get a couple of more or less conservative justices appointed. She got one that actually is a conservative justice appointed, but she also appointed more progressive judges, more post-Zionist judges, more radical judges. And she did all of this while empowering the legal fraternity, the attorney general and the state prosecution, to extents that nobody had ever imagined. And she did all of this while attacking them publicly, so that she was very much hiding her actual agenda, or pushing two agendas at once, one to her constituents and one in practice. And so, I think based upon...
But you were supposed to be in the Knesset then, and the thing is that in that round of election, it was the first round in April 2019, they were 1,400 votes below the
threshold.
The threshold percentage, which means that all the votes they did get, which was almost 4 seats in the Knesset, were disappeared.
They lost more votes historically than I think any single party has ever lost. I mean, because what happened was all of those votes were just thrown into the garbage can. Everybody who voted for us was a lost vote, and it was because of that even though you had a massive majority for the right in April 19th, Netanyahu wasn't able to form a government. And we can get into that a little bit more. But what I wanted to say was then, because I'm telling my saga, I'm telling my story. See, Gadi, I just want to share with our viewers. So, a lot of people will...
Thanks for sharing, Carol.
No problem. That's what we do now in our
12 steps.
in our post reason world we all just share. But this actually has, wider implications, which is why I'm sharing this and not what I made for my children to eat for breakfast this morning, although that would be shorter. But the point is that the tell in those elections that we ran, there were several, but one of them was that they suddenly at the last minute decided that they didn't want to run with the Jewish Home Party, that they wanted to split, they wanted to start a new party. And I made a mistake at that point where I didn't understand the implications of what they had just done. And I went ahead with the plan that we had for the other party, which is a party that's existed since the founding of the state. And I didn't realize the implications. I thought, well, they're still the same ideologically driven politicians they were before. And if I'm there, if they're actually asking me to be on the list with them, then that means that they're true ideologues, because why else would anybody turn to me? And so I went ahead with them. But the thing is that nobody had ever voted for the new right. That's what they called themselves before. And they had no base because they just abandoned their base when they left their party. And what Naftali and Ayelet did, which I thought was really bizarre, and I think in retrospect extremely telling, was that they refused to run an ideological campaign. It was all a personal campaign. It was all about them. It was all about how Naftali wanted to be defense minister and he was going to save Israel from Hamas, and that Ayelet was going to, bring order to the Supreme Court, and she was going to fix everything and have her fake revolution in the legal fraternity. And it was all about them. It wasn't about any issues. It was all about them. And the thing is,
with the cockiness that, in retrospect, looks just ridiculous. Because I remember seeing that spot that Ayelet did with a perfume called fascism, which was supposed. It was what?
Was it fascism? Yeah,
it was fascism because it was supposed to mock the idea that people call anything right fascism. And she and Ayelet is very beautiful, so she was like in a model mode, and she sprayed this perfume on herself and said, "They call it fascism, but to me it smells like democracy." And it was like, you're not Saturday Night Live. You're supposed to be a serious party. What is this thing? And it gave the air like they think they're superstars and it's all in their pockets.
But that's the other thing, is that they're a media party. They're a party that was created by the media. They're a party that exists because the very far left media in Israel has been pushing them since they entered politics, and they've been pushed because they oppose Netanyahu, because they're something that you can sell to people as a right-wing party that stands in opposition to Netanyahu, that Netanyahu doesn't like, that Netanyahu claims is phony. And so what they get and what they've received for the past 9 years since they entered politics is the most lavish, the most supportive coverage that any right-wing politician in Israeli history has ever received. I mean, they get coverage that is sort of even better in a way than some left-wing politicians, which is just shocking. And it just shows that they are pawns in a much larger game of the left, because the left knows that they cannot win a governing majority. And the only way that they can possibly form a government in Israel where you have a very solid center-right majority of the population is by stealing votes from the right and bringing them to the left. And so what we're seeing now that you were talking about is that this bizarre coalition of far left, of anti-Zionist Arab parties, an anti-Zionist left-wing party. I mean, I never saw much difference between post-Zionist and anti-Zionist. You have a labor, just think about this. The Labor Party was the party that founded the state of Israel. This was David Ben-Gurion's party. This was Golda Meir's party. This was the party that ruled Israel basically alone for the first, how many years? 33 years of its history. It was a one-party state. And now led by a post-Zionist Merav Michaeli, who is as radical as they come. I mean, she and AOC would be best friends if they were together. They even dress the same. I guess AOC dresses better, but they have that same look. She brought in an Arab woman named Ibtisam Mar'ana on her list, and this is a woman who hates Israel, who has expressed deeply, I mean, Iranian-like anti-Semitism and hatred of this country. She called for the obliteration of a city in Israel called Zichron Yaakov. And then at her first speech at the Knesset, she stood at the podium, the rostrum, and she talked about how her father told her that he had dug this mass grave of the victims of the massacre that Israeli forces perpetrated at the town of Tantura in 1948. And the problem with this is that this labor MK, this a member of Knesset from the Labor Party, was spewing a blood libel because it's already been proven, not only by historical researchers, but also in a court, that there was no massacre whatsoever in 1948 at the town of Tantura. It was an entire lie. It was a pure fabrication. And here's this woman in an ostensibly Zionist party on the left spewing this complete slander of Israeli soldiers and of the state of Israel, and ascribing to this some sort of familial tie that her father did something that never happened. So she's also saying her father is a liar. But the whole thing was so absurd, and it shows really the fusion of the Israeli left, the Israeli Jewish left, and the Israeli Arab anti-Zionist, anti-Semitic far left. And it's not surprising. This is what happened in the Communist Party in Israel. The Communist Party in Israel, Maki, the founding of the state, was in a way very similar to the Labor Party. And Ben-Gurion, when he founded the country, he said that he wouldn't form a government with
Herut or Maki.
Right, with Herut, with Begin's party on the right, and he wouldn't form a government with Maki on the left. And here the woman who's taken over, the name of the party that he led is Maki. So we have these situations here in Israel which are impossible. But the one thing that Bennett and Shaked, because they have such belief in themselves and they're so impervious to rational thought and reason, because they're so sure that they themselves are intrinsically supposed to be the leaders of this country, that the fact that the government that they want to form now, tonight, tomorrow, the next day, is going to be dominated by a very far left majority, they don't think it matters. And the funny thing, I was thinking about this, and this goes back to the Supreme Court making rulings that have turned it and the Attorney General in Israel into really the only significant decision makers in the country. They're far more powerful than all of our elected leaders. I was thinking about it. Naftali Bennett is now arranging with Yair Lapid that Naftali Bennett will be prime minister. And although the right wing is going to be a minority of the members of their coalition, it's supposed to have equal weight and also be in charge of, the more important ministries. And so, this is something that the left wing would agree to, that because they want so badly to get rid of Netanyahu because he's the most powerful right-wing political force, and he's one of the main obstacles to the left ever getting a governing majority on their own, that they'll be willing to take this. And I thought about it. Well, no, because one of the left-wing NGOs the next day after the government is formed is going to petition the Supreme Court and say it's unequitable or unconstitutional, not forgetting that Israel has no constitution, for the right wing, which has fewer votes than the left, to have control of the government. And the justices will sit and they'll ruminate for about 2.5 minutes, and they'll come back with a learned decision that actually that left-wing NGO is perfectly correct, and therefore the government, and as it stands, is illegal, and that it doesn't work that way, and it can't be, and therefore the left has to control the government. And then what exactly is Naftali Bennett going to do? Because he can't go back to the voters. Because he goes back to the voters, he doesn't cross the threshold, he doesn't get elected to the Knesset.
It's funny how obvious all this is now out in the open, because some of the left-wing commentators have openly said that we only need Naftali Bennett to get rid of Netanyahu, and afterwards we'll deal with him. Almost in this language. Someone called him the red carpet on which the left-wing party will come into power. And he's going.
Somebody
right
called him a
trap.
one-night stand. He was, right?
Yeah.
A one-night stand.
Yeah. A one-night stand. It was Ava Galon. She said, it's not a romance, it's a one-night stand. And he's stepping right into this trap, because this, I think, the temptation of Wikipedia, he's going to have a line in Wikipedia saying he was prime minister of Israel for 5 minutes.
See, he doesn't understand that all you need to do to have anything at all written in Wikipedia is to become a friend of an editor of Wikipedia.
That's it.
That's all you need. You could just write
just
it.
Came up with a solution to
the
Israel's
whole
constitutional crisis.
The Israeli solution. It's my
exactly.
book. I'm a solution maker. Yes. No.
So what's next, Karen? Where is all this going? Where are we gonna find our? Maybe by the time this podcast is broadcast, there will be some form of solution. What are the options? Let's see how good we are at guessing.
What do you mean? What's going to happen with Naftali and
with the coalition building? Just to sum up for those of us who,
all right. Well, there is
those who
one
got lost in the
woods.
In the woods here, the question is whether those parties that were detached from the right are going to go with a left-wing coalition, or are they going to come back to the right? So where are we? And where's and we have Ram to
I think we have to talk about Ram, but we can just close this up and then get into our big fight over Ram, because Gadi and I, we fight about this. We don't fight about much, but we fight about this, and we can discuss why and who's right and who's wrong is, I guess, God knows. But and anyway, nobody's thinking things through, so it doesn't really matter about our thoughtful analysis, but I'm sure you viewers will care. So we'll talk about that in a second. But just to close this out, look, these three parties, well, two in particular, Gideon Saar's New Hope Party and Avigdor Lieberman's Israel Beitenu party, are so fueled by hate. I mean, they have no rationale at all. I mean, they have no guiding concept, no measurable ideological message that anybody can really understand, aside from the fact that they hate Netanyahu and all they want to do is destroy him and all they want to do is get him out of politics. And that's exactly what they intend to do, and that's what they've been working on all along. So I think that the chance that will happen is nil. And I think, Gideon Saar is an interesting character because for a lot of reasons, but he was a fair to middling Minister of the Interior, Minister of Education. But one of the things that happened along the way was that there were allegations made of him of major sexual issues, harassment and other things with women in nightclubs and in the education ministry when he was there.
There wasn't. I don't think there was an investigation. There was
an allegation.
There was an expose in some newspapers, or so the rumor went, and allegedly they buried them.
They buried them, but I think they opened up a check, but they never closed it. So he has these suspicions hanging over his head, and we know what that does to a politician and how he decides what is most important to him ideologically, of course, and on a values level, when he has this sort of Damocles hanging over his, neck and telling him that they can open up this very embarrassing criminal probe of his personal behavior at any moment of any day. And so that's one thing about Gideon Saar, that now presents himself as a man who all he cares about is professional integrity, and Netanyahu is just, he's no good, and he's not a really moral actor. He's a horrible person. We all hate him. And that is the end of that. So that's one aspect of Gideon Saar. The other one is that, he has been sort of a subversive character in the Likud for many years. And Netanyahu, I think, made one huge mistake with him, which is that he forgot the wisdom of the Godfather, which is keep your friends close and your enemies closer. So instead of, trying to embrace Gideon and not give him, that opportunity to do anything because he's too close to you, he pushed him away because he didn't trust him, rightly. But that gave Gideon Saar the ability to betray him. And he has. And I think that the chance that they're going to come back or that they're going to make a deal is nil. And last night on the news, Netanyahu even offered the premiership to Naftali Bennett for the first year of the next government in order to bring Gideon Saar in to have a working coalition, so that there would be a rotation. Then Naftali would get the prime minister for the premiership for the first 12 months, and then Netanyahu would come back in.
this whole idea that this construction can work is just, in my mind, it's a symbol of the depth of this crisis. It's like a complicated bureaucratic arrangement instead of a government, in order to somehow juggle balls that don't fit together. And I think Netanyahu has been fighting in this struggle in a way that I think was counterproductive. And we'll talk about Ram soon, so I'll have more to say about that. But if you're a governing party, you can't take part in a stunt of a political extortion with a shakedown artist who has 7 seats in the parliament. It's just, you're giving up something too important, and you're dragging yourself down into the gutter.
You have this problem in Israel, and I think that we see this acutely playing out right now with Netanyahu. And I mean this in a complimentary fashion for him, which is that people act, particularly Naftali Bennett, but not only him, Yair Lapid as well, and many others, as though the premiership of Israel is just another job. It's just like an accessory. Well, I was the education minister. I was the defense minister for 5 minutes. I was the minister of the economy for a year and a half. I have all the experience you need. I'm totally primed for the job. I can just do it. And it's no big deal. Changing the driver in the raced car, it's the same car, just a driver. But of course, that's a totally insane, notion. You change a race car driver with your grandma, she's not going to finish the Indy 500 alive, and, she won't get through a lap. And what we're talking about here...
You don't know my grandma. You just don't know my grandma.
All right, I didn't mean to. I wasn't. I was talking about grandma.
General grandma.
A grandma.
Not Savta Bracha.
An apocryphal grandmother. A very strange grandmother, because most grandmothers could totally drive that sports car. Go through and win the Indy 500, no problem. Right? That's just not a problem. But just in my non-existent, totally theoretical grandma, she couldn't possibly do that. And here, you have a similar situation. Israel is the most complex country, and because, first of all, our governing system, as we're living through right now in this prolonged crisis, is very difficult to run. Second of all, we are the most threatened country on the face of the planet. I mean, we have 150,000 missiles pointing at us only from Lebanon. If you add Syria, you add Gaza, you add Yemen, you add Iran, we have hundreds of thousands of missiles all pointing at us. We are the bullseye for all of these people. And now we have a situation where in the West, it's the free world is being led by a man who is pushing an agenda that is transforming the United States of America into a post-constitutional democracy rather than a constitutional republic. He's spreading these, the ideology of wokeness, of anti-Westernism, into the bloodstream of all aspects of public life in Israel. And this ideology is sort of hatred of Israel, hatred of the Jewish nation is baked into this broth. And so, we are facing the most hostile U.S. administration in the history of U.S.-Israel relations, that is empowering our worst enemies throughout the region, who are pointing those missiles at us. And now we're gonna, take out. And boy, I'm showing my I don't know, my early onset dementia, my age, or the fact that I'm a girl and I didn't pay that much attention to race cars throughout, my life. But I suddenly can't think of the most famous race car driver in the history of race car
NASCAR.
driving.
I can't help you with that.
But yeah, no, I was thinking about now I wasn't thinking of NASCAR, but whatever. You're taking the best driver we have, and we're replacing him with an 87-year-old grandmother with double cataracts, and this is a problem. And so I think, when you look and you say this isn't right, a ruling party shouldn't be behaving this way. He shouldn't be making these deals with all of these different, crazy, extortionary grifters that have made their way into positions in the political life of this country that are very difficult to extricate them from, in their little fiefdoms with 5.5 people who vote for them. He sees the dangers, he sees the challenges, and I think that a lot of this is out of concern for Israel. Everybody in the media, that they all hate him, and they've all been indoctrinating the public to despise Netanyahu and to have contempt for Netanyahu because they fear him so much, because they know that he doesn't need them, and that he's smarter than them, and that he's done a really good job leading this country. So they're telling everybody that the reason why he's making these deals is the only thing that he cares about is his trial. But frankly, if all he cared about was his trial, he would not have remained in politics, because the offer was basically on the table. We'll leave you alone. We know that everything that we're charging you with are actions that are non-criminal. We're pretending that non-criminal actions are criminal in order to turn you into a criminal, which you're not. That's basically what they said before the 2019 elections, when the attorney general, who is as crooked as a candy cane, said that he was going to indict Netanyahu. He made it very clear that if Netanyahu bowed out of politics, that he would leave him alone. So if all he cared about were his trial, he would have left politics and just, gone off to pasture. That's not what he's doing. And I think that this speaks to the opportunism of his opponents, that they're pretending that the legal distress that he's in, which is purely, the politicization of the law in order to get rid of him, his concern over his legal plight is what is forcing his action. And I don't think that that's true. I really think that a left-wing government at this time, led by these people or any people on the left, frankly, in this international environment, is very dangerous for this country. I think it's very dangerous for the region, and I fear for the future of this country.
The worst thing from all the bad options that we currently have is that we'll have a short-lived Netanyahu government who will go down in flames and in shame, and then we'll hand over the government to the left for a long time. So I think we can't, it's not, I see the urgency, and we know, and now the United States is rushing back to the nuclear agreement with Iran, but we are going to have at least 3.5 more years of a hostile Biden administration who is bowing down to Iran. And important as the 6 months now are, it's not worth paying with these 6 months for 3 years of a left-wing government. Which is why I think maybe we should get into the question of Ram, because the key to forming that government is in leaning on the Ram party, the Joint Arab List, which is a
it's not the Joint Arab List. It's a separate party. It left the Joint Arab List.
No, Ram is the United Arab List. Sorry, הרשימה הערבית המאוחדת. You're right. The United Arab List is a branch of the Muslim Brotherhood, and they have and their plan against Zionism is long term. So, just to explain to our listeners what the problem in forming this puzzle of the coalition is that Netanyahu hasn't enough seats, and he needs the religious Zionists on the one hand, on his right, and the now outstretched arms of Ram, of the United Arab List, which is going to save it. But the problem is that religious Zionists are not willing to sit with Ram. So what's your solution to this quagmire? And I might say again, I was against courting Ram because my fear was that once Netanyahu, the right wing, gives legitimacy to an anti-Zionist Arab party, they will become the, how do you say Lashon HaMazonaim? This is such an important phrase in Israeli politics.
That they become the
tipping center of Israeli politics, and they will do and you give them the opportunity to divide and rule. This was my fear, but you think I'm wrong, which is obviously wrong.
You're right. I'm obviously wrong, and you're obviously right. but
No,
before,
I actually said you were obviously right. I was.
oh, okay. Well, good. Well, I was going to say, having conceded the point, I'll give my failing argument at all at any rate. And obviously, I don't. I cannot disagree about the ideology of the Muslim Brotherhood. I cannot disagree with the fact that members of Ram Party of the United Arab List Party have gone and celebrated with terrorists upon their release from prison. These are people who murdered Israelis, and members of that party. Most recently, a former member of Knesset from that party went and met with the released terrorist murderer who was paroled after 20 odd years in prison, who murdered an Israeli soldier. So I think there's no question that there are significant issues with this party and the ability of any self-respecting Zionist party or politician or government to have them having the governing coalition be dependent on them abstaining from a vote of confidence in the Knesset that enables it to be formed. So I agree that there's a problem with that. I disagree with you on two things. One is I disagree with you on the damage that a left-wing government can and in all likelihood will do to this country if it's empowered. And I also don't believe that it will be empowered for a short time. I think that it will manage to survive for quite some time because Naftali Bennett will not want to go to elections, and he will do everything that he can to keep that government going because he knows that he will not get reelected. So I think that will have an impact on the longevity of that government. Obviously, the left will want to. In fact, if that government falls, it'll fall because the left, and this may happen. I think the likely scenario for such a government falling is that the left will overturn it because they'll think that having pushed Netanyahu out of the premiership, they'll finally have an opportunity to win an election outright, so that they may want to topple the government. That's possible. But Naftali Bennett isn't going to be the one who overthrows that government after he's just completely betrayed all of his voters. So that's one. And I think that even if they're only in there for a year, for 6 months until they're overturned, and then, another 3 to 6 months until there are new elections, and then another government is formed, that they can do an enormous amount of damage, particularly in terms of what they're likely to do with the Biden administration, and what they're likely to do with the International Criminal Court, and what they're likely to do with the UN, and what they're likely to do in terms of accepting America returning to the nuclear deal or sharing intelligence about Israel's capabilities with a government, with an American administration that clearly, as we saw from Zarif's leaked conversations saying that John Kerry gave him information about Israeli military strikes against Iranian targets in Syria. I think we can expect a lot more of that with this government, with this administration. So I think that they would be very dangerous. I think they'd be dangerous with what they would be doing with the PLO, with the Palestinian Authority, what they would be willing to do in the territories. I don't believe that Naftali will block anything. I don't believe that Gideon Sa'ar will block anything. I think that it'll be a very big problem. And, we've had this in the past. And if we have it again at this time, it will be very dangerous. That's one thing. I think that you don't see the danger as I do. That's one thing. The other thing is I think that the precedent for working with these anti-Zionist parties was already set. It was set when Yair Lapid tried to get he got a parliamentary majority that if Netanyahu hadn't formed this crazy two-headed government with Benny Gantz last year that fell because they hate one another and they see eye to eye on absolutely nothing. If he hadn't formed that, then working with the Joint Arab List, which is even more radical and is openly anti-Semitic, they would have passed a law in the Knesset that barred Netanyahu from forming a government.
Wait. First of all, the precedent is Oslo. But the Rabin government, which relied on the support of the Arab parties, but that's all on the left. And what is happening is that we prevented a left-wing government because some of the right-wingers in Benny Gantz's party, which was once a big deal. I don't know if anyone outside Israel can
Even
follow
remembers it.
the many parties that appear and disappear. And as you remember, two of its members could not vote for a government a coalition that leans on or depends on the Arab parties. And now, after Netanyahu has courted them, how will we have the moral force to say to Naftali Bennett and to his list and to other MKs in his list, you can't do that because that's a line you do not cross? Because
Right.
whenever,
So I
you're
think
on Twitter, you see what they say. Yeah.
I don't, look, Twitter is a sewer. And every time I'm on it, I say, why am I in a sewer? I don't want to be in a sewer. I want to leave a sewer. So I've actually been on Twitter a lot less over the past couple of weeks than I have in the past. And I'm probably just going to quit because I hate it. But the thing of moral, and this is a moral line you don't cross. I think we've had all too much talk on the right about morals when we see that we're operating in a world of amoral actors, of opportunistic actors, of people who don't care about anything. And I think what you saw with the actions of those two right-wing breakaways who joined this left-wing party and then used their power there to block the formation of a left-wing government that relied on the Arab Party was that they blocked a right-wing coalition as well, because if they just joined the Likud outright, and they could have, we would have had a stable governing majority with 61 members last year. So they blocked that, and they hold an enormous amount of responsibility for where we are today. And one of them is in the Knesset with Gadi Taub. Both of them ran. One of them got elected. And they don't have any problem with sitting with the Arabs today. So I think that their morality was morality for a minute, and it didn't bring about any great result for Israel, and we have nothing to thank them for. I also think that governing is not about necessarily doing something that is pure, that is right, that you can look at yourself in the mirror afterwards, because government is choosing between bad alternatives in an imperfect world with deeply flawed actors working with you. And that's what we have in Israel.
No, that's you're, I think, misreading my argument. I didn't
let me just finish my argument, because I'm on a roll.
Why? Okay, let's finish it.
I just want to finish my argument, and then you can argue with it after I've made it. So, when you give up power because of, you have values, you won't join a coalition that Ram isn't even a member of, it just that they would abstain in the confidence vote of a 59-seat government to enable it to be formed. So there are 3 points here that I want to make, and I'll try to make them briefly so that we don't go too far over time and that you can tell me why I'm wrong. But the first thing is that when you have power, you have power. You can do things with it. And if you have a 59-member government that is, a coherent government that is joined in ideology, that has shared convictions and shared goals, you can do a lot. And it doesn't matter whether you're in power for 9 months or whether you're in power for 4 years. You can do a lot with that time, and maybe you can't pass laws in the Knesset so easily, but you can do a lot with just your ministries. That is very valuable, very worthwhile, and would make a big difference in governing in Israel. That's one thing. That's what you can do. The other thing is what you pay for allowing the other side to govern. And here again goes back to what I said before, that there is a clear and present danger in Israel. We saw it in 1992 when, all of these pure ideologues on the right toppled the Shamir government, and Rabin came into power, and he went on this misadventure with Yasser Arafat, gave him guns, legitimacy, territory, money, and turned the Gaza Strip into Afghanistan, and he turned the Palestinian areas of Judea and Samaria into, terror statelets all over, and unleashed the worst terrorism ever in this country, including back in pre-state days. And then again, Hanan Porat and the ideological rightists toppled Netanyahu in 1999, and they brought us the Oslo War. They brought us the worst terrorism onslaught in Israeli history with the Barak government. So we know that transferring power to the other side is a deadly thing to be doing. And so you're talking about two things. You're talking about what will happen if you don't have power, what you can't do, and what price the country is going to pay for giving the other side power. And the last thing that I want to say on that level is that there's another aspect to this, which is the longevity of this government. I don't see, you think that if they form a government and it falls very quickly, and I think that it will likely fall very quickly, that this is going to be a blot on the name of the right. Everything that the right wing does in Israel is a blot on their name because the media hates the right, and they will take anything that the right wing does and present it as evil, as sinful, as immoral, and as illegal and corrupt. And so there's really, when you're dealing with this kind of environment, which is poisonous to begin with, and you do something that will advance your agenda and block the other guy from his, all you can do is make your case to the public. All right, that's all you can do. And either they believe you and you win, or they don't believe you and you lose. But in the meantime, you've taken the cards that you have, and these are crappy cards. You deal with them and you go with your hand. And that's what I think a 59-seat minority coalition that is based upon the abstainment in one confidence vote, one in the Knesset, by this party would do. And you can say, and I totally get it. I totally understand your side. Don't get me wrong. I'm not minimizing the implications of one and done, and it never works that way. And you're doing this. But we have a situation where you have 15 members of Knesset who are in openly anti-Zionist parties, who are pro-terrorist. But you also have parties on the left that are equally, I talked about Imtisan Mar'ana and the blood libel that she spewed from the rostrum of the Knesset in her first speech in the Knesset as member of Knesset, a blood libel. And, you have other people like that in these left-wing parties. So to pretend that there's a difference between the Joint Arab List, the United Arab List, and Meretz and the Labor Party under Merav Michaeli is simply an optical illusion. It isn't true. And so, we have a lot of seats in the Knesset that belong to people who increasingly think that it's all right to call for the annihilation of the Jewish state in one way or another. And that's a problem because it's just like in the United States with the Republicans and the Democrats. It means that only one side of the political spectrum, it can be trusted with the keys to this nation.
But the problem is that in a democracy, you can't constitutionally guarantee that, although now the Democratic Party, who thinks that they are the party who are the only ones who can rule responsibly, is trying to change the rules.
Right.
But what I'm saying is that you present my argument as if this was a question of moral purity, and it's not. It's a question of legitimacy, and legitimacy is actually hard political currency. It's not this. I totally agree with you about the Puritanism of the religious parties. We've just had a disastrous historical miss under the Trump administration when the religious settlers rejected the Trump plan because allegedly it gives it legitimizes the Palestinian state, which of course the Palestinians would have rejected the plan, and we could have applied Israeli law at least to the wide strip of the Bikat HaYarden. How do you say the Jordan
Valley, and also to and also to all of the Jewish communities in Judea and Samaria, including my town of Efrat.
But I'm not making an argument for moral purity. What I'm saying is that once you make Ram, the United Arab List, a legitimate party for the right as well, then its voters and all other voters will treat it henceforth as the holding the balance of the whole system. And they will use it as a wedge to because the Muslim, that's the long-term plan. Now you're saying it's just a one-time vote, but that's not true because at any point they can vote against the government along with the opposition and topple it. So you'll have a government.
No, but that's fine because now what we have is a non-functioning government, right? That is essentially controlled by the Attorney General through this division of power equally between a party with 30 members in it and a party with 8 members in it. Okay. And it's insane, and it's totally illegitimate, and it's caused Israel to be paralyzed at almost every level for over a year. So, this is what we have. And what this government would do would end that, because then for a period, 3 months, 6 months, however long it lasts until Ram votes it out, you have all of the members of this government agree with one another. There's only one prime minister, and he gets to make the decisions. I mean, Israel has succeeded in getting out of the coronavirus first in the world because Netanyahu was the prime minister, not because he had Benny Gantz at his side as a co-prime minister. Everything that he did with Pfizer that got Israel the vaccine first in the entire world, which is a feat that, Harvard Business School, if they were still a business school and Harvard were still Harvard, would be writing case studies about this and teaching what he did to their management students for the next 100 years. Okay? But he had to do it because it wasn't just that he did it as prime minister. He did it with both hands tied behind his back, with Benny Gantz subverting him from behind. And he did it behind Benny Gantz's back. So everything that Netanyahu did, he did like as like a master of acrobatics, and and a contortion artist, and you look at this and you say, this will be gone. This will be done for the length, the duration of this government. We won't have that anymore. We'll have a normal government,
but
and it'll last for 9 months.
Caroline, is you're willing to trade 3 or 6 or 9 months for I don't know how long? And what I'm saying is first of all, what can happen is that if Netanyahu already did this, legitimate Mansour Abbas and the United Arab List, and now
that's already been done.
And now we can't say anything when Gideon Sa'ar and Naftali Bennett, right-wing parties, do the same. Because if you say anything, you'll say, well, you were going to do this. So we lost this card.
So we might as well do it. So now you're saying we're paying full price up front without getting a government. I'm saying let's pay full price up front and get the government. Because you're saying the price has already been paid.
That's a valid argument. But my fear is that whatever we build on this is going to be built on, how do you say cholot nodedim? Sand, I know. On shifting sands.
On shifting sands, exactly.
And then when this collapses, we will have a long, cold winter of a left-wing government, because it will shatter the right. So that's my fear. I don't know. It's anyone's guess which of these will unfold.
Well, I think that by the time that this show is up on live on the air, we'll probably know, or we won't. I mean, because there's another option, which is that the mandate for forming the government is going to be returned to the Knesset, which is I don't know that that's ever happened. Which means that any member of the Knesset out of 120 who can get 61 other members of Knesset to recommend that he form the government, that he can form a government. And it doesn't have to be the head of a party. It can be somebody else. And so this is sort of seen as a way maybe to edge Netanyahu out and get somebody else from Likud to do that. The only problem with that is that for Netanyahu to be edged out of the chairmanship of the Likud under its own constitution has to have primaries for leadership. So a lot of things can happen, but we are definitely seeing here in a growing likelihood, more likely than not, that Netanyahu will be ending his premiership after 12 years in office. Israel will be entering into a period of profound weakness of leadership and governments, whoever runs the show, and we're doing it at a time that is acutely dangerous, both from the perspective of the regional threats and of the rising regional threats as a result of America basically changing sides in this war. Sort of, if they were in our tank, it's sort of like they were in our tank, shooting the enemy with us under Trump, and Biden got out of the tank, got into the Iranian tank, and started shooting at us. And that's basically where we are today with the Biden administration, and the prospects of war as a result are rising. They're rising, and when Israel when Israel, sends out vibes of weakness to our region, they get picked up. And we're already seeing this in the uptick of Iranian aggression against our merchant vehicles. We're seeing it in missile strikes against Israel from Gaza. We're seeing it in Palestinian terrorism here in Judea and Samaria. Yesterday, there was a terrorist attack in Samaria, and 3 yeshiva students were shot. 2 of them are still in mortal danger and in the hospital fighting for their lives. 1 is in critical condition. And of course, we wish everybody full and speedy recovery. But this is what happens when the United States is sending out signals that it doesn't have Israel's back anymore, and Israel, for its part, is projecting profound weakness in terms of governance. And Netanyahu, who everybody in the region fears and respects, is on his way out. The likelihood of war increases, and then, of course, if we are led by strategic midgets, as is increasingly likely today, then we're going to find ourselves in a very difficult position in dealing with what seems to be awaiting us.
Yeah. Oh, that sniffle at the end was just the right note. Yeah. No, I'm overwhelmed because it really is scary. I don't remember.
How's my microphone doing this week? I don't know if our viewers saw, but last week we had an audio mishap, so now I have this brand new microphone.
So next time we'll speak. Hopefully we'll know something more, because this has been torture. It's like we don't know where we're going for 2 years now.
Yeah, look, we've been online for an hour. We don't know what happens since we started.
We don't know what happened in the hour that we were here. All right.
Okay, take care, Gadi. I'm glad to have you back. I'm glad that our viewers are returning to us, and come next week, and hopefully we can talk less about Israeli politics and more about other things, because the less news in Israel, the better. But we'll definitely keep you updated on what's happening and what's happened. And now my children are coming back home, so I have to run away anyway.
That's a nice
saved by the bell. Exactly, yeah, saved by the bell. All right, take care.
Thanks, Caroline.
Thank you. Bye-bye.